Anyway, bio continues. Almost econ doctorate,
Hold on.
all caps.
We're live. Sorry.
Okay.
So, I'm just
I'll come back to it.
yeah, that's cool. I'm sorry. Just give me 1 sec. I need to promote this. What is that? Tell us what that is while I sit here and promote.
Yeah, sure. So this is, as you can see, the guide on for 2-4's subordinate battalion, 2nd Brigade, 4th ID subordinate reconnaissance squadron, which is a battalion-sized element. This coffee mug, as you know, I collect coffee mugs from everywhere I go. This coffee mug was found in the second drawer of the desk that I assumed control over on my first deployment. Incidentally, it was sitting on top of a what do you call it? The little things you set your drink on a table. Oh my God, what's
Coaster?
the word? It escapes me. Coaster. Sitting on top of a coaster that said Memphis, Beale Street, Gibson guitars. It had the Gibson guitar symbol and a whole bunch of other stuff, even though that the guitar factory wasn't on Beale Street. But all these like Memphis symbols on it. It was a Memphis coaster. And this mug was sitting on top of it. And the dude who had had the job before me, left it there, got on a plane and bounced out of country. So I assumed the coffee mug and the coaster, both of which I brought home from Afghanistan when I came home.
Sweet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's an awesome segue into what we're actually going to be talking about tonight. Hey guys, welcome to My Political Mind. I'm back on with my brother tonight, and we're going to actually get into maybe some policy discussion, especially regarding one Joseph R. Biden. So, do you have the stream up on your end at all? Can you get it up on your end?
The stream, I can get it up, and B, I don't know about the stream.
What are you on right now? Your phone?
I'm just on Zoom with you. Nope, on my laptop.
Do you have your phone?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so get on it, and you can go to the stream.
Where's the stream? You gotta tweet me a link or something.
Go to YouTube.
YouTube/My Political Mind.
No, I'm not that advanced yet.
Okay, I'm at YouTube.
No, go
search
to the
My Political Mind.
Yeah. And there should
5
be
5 videos, 7 subscribers.
Yes.
And I click
Yo,
the link.
what up?
1 watching now. That must be me.
Probably. It says.
Why do I need that? Oh, so I can see what you have up there?
Yeah.
I see. Well, it's too small for me to see, but I got you.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna go over a few things, but
first yeah. Illustrate the policy. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well. First thing I'm gonna do is go to Joe Biden's planned first 100 days in office, and this is assuming Joe Biden is inaugurated on January 20th.
Stop! Don't do that.
I'm just saying, you never know. You never know.
The only way Joe Biden's not inaugurated on January 20th is if he dies from natural causes and Kamala Harris assumes office early. That's it. Because legally, he is the next president of the United States, as all pertinent battleground states have certified. He's over 270 with certified states. The game is over. We stop placating the dipshit in chief. Oh, let me say, All views expressed herein do not reflect the opinions or position of the United States Army or the DoD, and reflect solely my opinion in all cases. Thank you.
You got to get that disclaimer out. All right, so this is Joe Biden's first 100-day plan, or at least some of it. This is by NPR. First things he wants to address, first critical thing that he wants to address, obviously, is COVID-19. COVID-19, this is what Biden says he'll do on day one or beforehand. COVID-19, assemble a coronavirus task force during his presidential transition. Now, he's already done this.
Yep.
Days after becoming president-elect, Biden announced a team of advisors that will spearhead his pandemic response once he takes office. The task force will be led by Dr. David Kessler, a former Food and Drug Administration commissioner, former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, and Dr. Marcella Nunez-Smith, an associate professor of medicine and epidemiology at Yale School of Medicine. Biden said, the advisory board will help shape my approach to managing the surge and reported infections, ensuring vaccines are safe, effective, and distributed efficiently, equitably, and free, and protecting at-risk populations. Thoughts on that?
Okay, so here's the important thing to understand about the task force and the major sort of variance between the Trump administration and the future Biden administration. I want you to go ahead and assume, despite what we know about some of the idiots that have served in the Trump administration, I want you to go ahead and assume every person from the VP down to the middle level bureaucrat, assume they all are educated people and understand the truth of what we see on TV when scientists go on there, like Dr. Fauci and other epidemiologists. When they go on TV and they say, here's the things we need to do, here's what we understand about the virus, here are the ways that we can reduce transmission of the virus, here's the ways we can mitigate the spread, all of that, right?
Right.
I want you to assume that every person under Trump understands these concepts and believes them. The major difference then becomes between a Trump administration and a future Biden administration, solely the figurehead, the leadership, right? These bureaucrats and public policy implementation personnel under Trump are stuck in a position where they know what they should do. They know how to implement a good policy. They know what that policy should be, but they are prohibited from doing so because it would anger the boss that appointed them, Trump.
Right.
Because he's a moron. The only difference then is...
Well, he's a fake strongman is what
Biden,
he is.
Right, fake strongman. Yeah. So Biden's going to come in. He's going to take a whole bunch of people, which he's already nominated, who I don't know anything specifically about. But he's going to take a whole bunch of people with the necessary qualifications on their resume, such that you can trust their opinion, put them in a position to make decisions and execute policy. And then he's going to say, okay, do what you would have done if I wasn't sitting here. The only difference is going to be Biden's going to go on TV and reinforce their decisions. He's going to go on, make public addresses and say, I support these decisions from these people with these qualifications, and we're going to follow them. It's my decision as commander-in-chief to implement this policy that I have authority over. And for the things that I don't have authority over, I encourage you, other governors, legislators and leadership of various states around the country, to do the same. What is that effectively doing? Biden is laying his political capital on the table, right? Showing his cards, saying, if this goes wrong, I am going to accept the political ramifications for that. But I believe that these people are saying the right thing. Trump would never do that. And that's why these people wouldn't go on TV and say this is what we needed to do, right? If you have a public policy person standing right next to an epidemiologist who doesn't know anything about public policy, and they're both saying, lock it down, stop the transmission of the virus, Yes, there's going to be economic impacts to this. It's going to be bad, et cetera, et cetera. They are hanging their asses out to dry. They could, when the economy tanks, people are going to blame them because they suggested it. However, when the president comes on TV and reinforces that direction and says, this is what I believe we need to do, he is the one that accepts culpability for that decision making. And that's the difference between a Biden and a Trump administration. It's not that the people on the coronavirus task force under Trump didn't know what to do. Fauci, Dr. Birx, the various fucking bureaucrats that worked in the
it's that Biden would take it's that Biden would take responsibility instead of just saying.
That's the difference.
Instead of just saying, it's up to the governors, y'all decide. That way, if anything happens in your state, well, it can't come back on me.
Right. In the military, we call that top cover, right? I'm a captain. I go to people and I say, hey, this is the decision I made. This is what we should do, right? If my boss, I'll brief my boss and say, this is what I want to do. He's going to say, you're the commander. You make the decision. And if he agrees with me, when it fucks up, when it goes wrong and it turns out to have been the wrong decision, he's going to look at it and say, we made a decision based on the evidence we had in front of us. I thought it was the right decision at the time, and I endorsed that decision and supported it. That's what leadership does. And then when shit hits the fan, he becomes the responsible officer. He's providing me top cover. That's what we do in strong organizations, strong institutions. They look at the evidence, they make rational decisions about the way to execute a particular policy or mission or operation, and then they agree on it, and then the senior most individual accepts what he's been given, accepts the responsibility for decision. That's how we succeed as strong institutions. And the executive branch of government, I just got a little banner that said my internet connection is unstable. That's bullshit. It's working fine.
I don't know. You kind of broke up a little bit.
The executive branch has struggled with that because there's no top cover. Having top cover is a majorly empowering sort of feeling. It's good for people who are at risk to. I'm going to branch off here a little bit, but it's something we call mission command in the Army. It is effectively a senior leader who's responsible for all decision making, empowering a subordinate to execute an operation the best way he sees fit, or he or she. He says to his subordinate, you have to execute this mission. Here's my desired end state. Here's what I want to come out of it. How you achieve that end state is entirely up to you. Be creative, be innovative, be efficient, do the best you can, figure out a way to get us to this point. And within the ethical, moral, and legal boundaries set out for us, we execute that mission to achieve that end state. And then the boss gets to take credit, right? But it is effectively empowering junior leaders. But if you are a micromanager or you're not willing to support your junior leaders, they become paralyzed by the potential consequences of their actions, which is what everybody from the VP Pence on down has suffered from throughout this entire pandemic, in my opinion. They are afraid to act in a decisive and capable manner on evidence the right way because they're afraid that their boss, Donald Trump, is going to see it as undermining his authoritarian stronghold on his base. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sorry to get off on such a long tangent on the first
fine.
topic of the night, but
yeah, COVID-19 push for immediate coronavirus legislation. As part of this initiative, the president-elect has also promised to begin working on a new coronavirus aid package before officially taking office, vowing to coordinate with state governors, mayors, and other local politicians. Quote, I'll ask the new Congress to put a bill on my desk by the end of January with all the resources to see how both our public health and economic response can be seen through the end, he said at an event in late October. Biden's proposed COVID-19 response plan calls for expanding coronavirus testing resources as well as for increasing the country's capacity to make personal protective equipment by leveraging the Defense Production Act. He has also backed legislation that would create a separate COVID-19 racial and ethnic disparities task force, which Vice President-elect Kamala Harris proposed in the Senate in the spring. As part of the COVID-19 relief package, Biden has in the past called for at least $10,000 in student loan debt to be canceled for all Americans. So that's a legislative part of his relief plan.
Yeah. Well, so the relief plan is the foundation for the rest of his plan, right? You can't ask people, don't go to work if they can't pay their bills.
Right.
Right? You have to provide, you at least have to
So
match
what do you,
for people to stay home.
Right. So speaking of that, what do you think about the countries that like went in a lockdown and they decided to pay like 75% or 80%? They nationalized wages and they decided, hey, we're going to pay 75 or 80% of your wage. What do you think that approach would work in countries such as ours, as the United States?
So it was a necessary step for those countries, and it would be for us to match their ability to stifle the virus. We would need to do the same thing. I think what's important to understand, though, is that in this country we have as a federal system, right? We have legal and constitutional, both at the federal and state level, legal and constitutional hurdles to doing so things like that. If you could provide a legal framework by which to execute such a policy, which I think is clearly, it's clearly evident that you can do so. You just got to get buy-in from from a lot of the Republican governors. But listen, let's be real. It is a fully socialist policy to say we're going to nationalize everybody's wages and do rent freezes and all kinds of things for the next, 90 days. Let's say you did it for 90 days. It's a fully socialist policy, but does that necessarily or inherently make it bad? And if you implemented that policy the right way, would it necessarily be unconstitutional? No, I don't think so. I think you could do it.
Hold on, time out. I want to push back a little bit. How is that socialist?
That is the federal government assuming responsibility for ensuring people get paid to make their bills.
But what part of that is socialism?
That is.
What's the definition of socialism?
Securing the social fabric through federal government funds or national government funds. If it's not a federalist system, that's what socialism is. I'm not saying it's bad.
That's not socialism.
That's what it is.
But that's not socialism. That
is 100% socialism.
No. Socialism is the workers. What? I see your face. Socialism.
I'm listening. Go ahead.
Hold on. Socialism is a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. That is the work of seizing the means of goods and production. So what exactly about what you said isn't just a national program, temporary program, as opposed to workers actually seizing the means of goods and production, whatever?
Okay, before we go on, go ahead and Google what communism is then.
Communism, a political theory derived from Karl Marx, advocating class war and leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. Right.
From each, how does it go? From each according to his ability to each according to his needs is communism, right?
Something like that, yes.
So the difference between socialism and communism is publicly owned versus community derived. And in a socialist society, It's where representatives, duly elected representatives, just like in an American system, decide what is best to maintain the social fabric, right? So that's any program, any system, any specific legislation that the community largely, as a majority, supports that benefits the population as a whole is effectively socialist. Now you're saying, I know that the key component you're going to is workers seize the means of production, but listen, that's not really what socialism is, because we define a lot of these Nordic countries, right, as such as the Netherlands and Swiss, not necessarily, a couple of European countries like Germany, largely more socialist than we are, but the workers don't own the means of production.
That's because those are more
in America,
social democracies, where they
sure,
use they have
social
capitalism. They use capitalism to
yes,
to pay for the social welfare
yes,
for their countries. Like in Sweden, they don't even have a minimum wage in Sweden.
But they don't really need it, though, do they?
Probably not, but they're like taxes
because
like
the government
50%.
Because the government provides things like health care.
They get health care, paid medical leave,
and various other social programs that ensure people aren't destitute when they're out of a job for 6 weeks.
3 months of vacation. I don't know.
But the thing about socialism, right, is you can't. The thing about any political / economic theory is that you can't really just say, hey, you can't pigeonhole it as this is what socialism is, and anything that's outside of that is not socialism.
Well, no, socialism is very wide spectrum. Socialism,
right? It's all on a slide rule, and if you push the slide rule towards a policy that says we are going to do rent freezes and mortgage freezes, and we're going to provide a benefits package and an aid package that provides 3, 6, 9 months, whatever, of wages, 80% of wages guaranteed to the population while we ask them to all stay home. That is a socialist policy.
Let me ask you something.
There's no two ways about it. It's not a bad thing. It's the right thing to do.
I have an answer to this question, and I'm sure you will likely agree, but can socialism and capitalism coexist?
Socialism, the way I would understand it, yes. Socialism is the way you Googled it, no. The workers can't seize the means of production and still have a capitalist system.
Do you believe that there should be some kind of hierarchy, like in capitalism? Like it naturally sets up a hierarchy system, and it's not a democratic system, in other words.
So capitalism in its purest form, and this is Ricardo, is that his name? David Ricardo?
I don't
know. David Ricardo, British economist, if I remember correctly. Largely responsible for he, along with Adam Smith, are really the ones that push, that help bring into the mainstream the idea of Adam Smith, David Ricardo. These are the guys responsible for pushing capitalism. Again, I'm not a historian, but in the form in which they envisioned capitalism, you cannot maintain it unregulated. You cannot maintain a democracy. You can't. And I texted you earlier when we were having a conversation about Trump. What were we talking about? We were talking about Trump and Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Facebook is a right-wing enabler because it has a capitalist financial incentive to capitalize, to profit from populism and nationalism, right? This sort of nationalist populist movement that Trump capitalized on. Facebook has a
I
financial incentive
consider
to
it
do the same.
fake populism, but yes, go ahead.
Sure, fake populism. That's fine. Whatever. I mean, anyway, Socrates in in uh, in Plato's Republic outlined the natural progression of government theories, right? And it's that. And forgive me, I'm a little sketch on the details. It's been a few years, but eventually, democracy slides into full populism, right? Where you have mass democracy. And what happens is the majority effectively reaches a state where their primary purpose is no longer the benefit of the entire population, but the benefit of themselves. As soon as a faction of a democracy reaches a majority, their incentive no longer becomes what's best for the country, or quote unquote what's best for America, but it's what's best for my faction of America. And then they will support policies in a pure populist democratic way, meaning popular vote. They will support policies that will secure that majority for them. And that's what we see Republicans doing these days. They use anti-democratic means to secure their vote totals in specific areas, their congressional representation, their Senate majority, to secure policies that will allow them to maintain their hold on power, regardless of whether or not those policies are congruent with what we would define as democracy. Which I know it's a little bit off topic, but to circle back onto, can you have socialism and capitalism coexist? Capitalism, unfettered, when coupled with populist movements like we see right now, cannot coexist with socialism. But in a social democracy, as described by Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, they in fact can, because the appropriate checks on capitalism are in place. Capitalism has a natural tendency to redistribute and concentrate wealth upwards, and the appropriate regulation and sufficient taxes on said wealth will ensure that what we've always talked about as the American dream is true, in that, okay, yes, you can go try to make billions of dollars utilizing this free market enterprise, this free market system. But we're going to take a huge chunk of that and we're going to use it for social policies that enable other people to attempt to do the same thing. The larger amount of people you have who are within reach of the said millionaire, billionaire American dream, the more people you have striving for it. The more people you have striving for it, the more innovation and economic development you end up with. And this is evidenced by a couple of different decades throughout American history, specifically the post-war era.
So you brought up somebody that I was wanting to talk about tonight. Bernie Sanders. What are your thoughts? Okay, so going into Super Tuesday, we didn't get to this during the last stream that I wanted to get to, but before Super Tuesday, you had Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, and Beto O'Rourke, like pretty much everybody but Biden, Sanders, and Warren drop out. Why do you believe? Because at that point in time, it didn't look like Warren had much of a chance at all. And if she was a progressive, like she said she was, or is this a calculated move on just the DNC, which obviously it was, because apparently Obama made phone calls to everybody, said drop out, back Biden. But do you believe Warren, for one, staying in the race, hurt Bernie? And do you believe that it was for a reason, for a purpose? because at that point in time, there was no chance for her beating Biden or Bernie, I would argue.
Okay, so the answer to this is threefold. First, yes, I think her staying in hurt Bernie. Yes, I think that was deliberate. I also think it was the right thing to do, but that's an opinion. That is subjective, I admit.
But
right?
for what?
I'm not
But
saying
why?
it's the right, because I think Elizabeth Warren, let me say this, Elizabeth Warren was the progressive that could have won, right? I don't think Bernie could have won. And that's a personal opinion. I don't think Bernie could have won. I think Bernie was a firebrand and had a staunch subset of supporters that couldn't necessarily be expanded. I don't think you could expand his support to scale. I think part of the reason Joe Biden won.
Did you see Nevada?
Sure. Yeah, I saw Nevada. But remember, I was also in Syria for a lot of the primaries. So there are a lot of things that I missed. But okay. I'll tell you this, the number one thing that made Joe Biden president-elect is his support among seniors. And no other Democratic candidate was going to get that. But let's be clear, and especially not the two progressives, whether it was Warren or Sanders, even though, and I fully admit Warren was my favorite, whether it was Warren or Sanders, neither one of them was going to get the support Joe Biden got among seniors, right? Joe Biden
both were struggling with seniors, yes.
Both were struggling with seniors, and Joe Biden actually won seniors, white seniors in key battleground states. And none of us saw that coming. Nope. None of us saw that coming. So
I think a lot of that has to do with the coronavirus pandemic, but
a lot of that has to do with coronavirus, absolutely. And the fact that Joe Biden seemed like a calm, steady, normal, regular politician who would just do regular things, who wasn't advocating, I'm not saying I think they're wild socialist policies, but what Republicans would call wild, radical socialist policies, right? And if you look back, whoever was advising Joe Biden at the time was really brilliant. Every time it came at him with this radical Democrat socialist fucking bullshit, every time Trump tried to attack him, and he was like, listen, you can call it radical to say that I want to secure health care for as many people as possible in the midst of a global pandemic. And like his answers were so calm, so clearly articulated, like, listen, this makes common sense. People of color, people 65 and older, people, who are on the lower income spectrum, these are all people at risk. We want to secure healthcare for this so we can reduce the amount of people that are killed by this virus. So he tied everything to the central issue of the time, which is the pandemic. And that's reassuring. If you're 72 years old and you hear a guy talking calmly about the things you expect to do to save additional lives and make it easier for people to get healthcare and testing and all sorts of things. And on the other hand, you hear, if I'm 72 and I hear that, and then I flip over to Fox News or Newsmax or OAN or whatever it is these crazies are watching these days, and I hear them railing about, Portland burning and, all these Antifa and all kinds of wildly scary,
yeah, I love the thing that they like to say that you hear a lot. They're like, their cities are burning. These cities are burning. I'm like, it's like 1 or 2 blocks. They're like, these cities are just.
Not just that. My favorite thing was they'd show images of what was taking place and call it, this is what'll happen in Joe Biden's America. I was like, yo, you took these pictures and
literally happening in Trump's America. Right.
So I think the contrast in how they handled that part of the campaign was really reassuring to a lot of uneasy seniors. And no other Democrat was going to win seniors like Joe Biden did. Plain and simple. And that's why he's in. And you can say you believe whatever you want. And I believe a lot of things about Elizabeth Warren, but I know she would not have won seniors like Joe Biden did. And I don't believe Bernie Sanders would have either. And because a firebrand versus a firebrand only serves to divide, and further dividing even just a little bit would have made the difference in this past election. But Joe Biden was just centered enough just calm and moderate enough for the few tens of thousands of people in those battleground states to vote for him. And that's what won him the election. So we can say what we want about who should have stayed in, who should have got out, whatever, but it was the right choice. I think Elizabeth Warren was one of those people when she realized after her Medicare for all faux pas in the primaries, which, I felt like was a media fucking contrived bullshit problem, but it is what it is.
In what way?
That
what
tanked
do you mean?
her. I think that her answer for that, although it was delayed, was perfectly reasonable, but it was too much of the media helped illustrate and highlight the split between her moderated approach for Medicare for all versus Bernie's hardline Medicare for all. And all it did was serve to highlight a developing platform, not having all the answers right away. So as the first front runner, right? Because let's face it, her poll numbers spiked well ahead of anybody else's. So as the lead front runner, the media looked for every reason to illustrate her differences with Bernie and her differences with Biden. And in doing so, split her votes between the two by the time we rolled around to the major primaries. And I think that was her downfall. And she shouldn't have allowed this. She shouldn't have allowed this to become an issue. If she had illustrated and clearly articulated a Medicare or healthcare policy before that and stuck to it, she wouldn't have been split the way she was. But it happened. But she stayed in because she was part of a faction of Democrats that knew Bernie wasn't going to win. And effectively, Ross Perot'd Bernie Sanders to make sure Joe Biden would win. But then we got to South Carolina, and nobody was beating Joe Biden in South Carolina, and that was the end of it. I think Joe Biden was going to win no matter what.
All right. So that brings us back, all the way back to Biden's plan. First 100-day plan. The economy. Reverse Trump's corporate tax cut. Biden has pledged that on his first day as president, he will raise corporate income taxes to 28%. I don't know if he could actually, is that executive order? Compared with the current 21% rate set by the GOP-led tax cuts of 2017. Also, this promise falls under Biden's larger proposed tax plan, which stresses that Americans making less than $400,000 would not pay more in taxes. Now, see, that was one of my biggest qualms with with Trump's tax cut plan. Was the tax cuts were nice, but over a 10-year period, 83% of the benefits would go to the top 1%, as their cuts would be permanent, and the middle class tax brackets would gradually increase over the next 10 years. Therefore, end up paying more and getting less. But so what do you think about the corporate tax rate? So under Obama it was 35%, then Trump cut it to 21%, and now it seems like Biden is trying to do like a middle ground and go to 28%.
28% is not going to be enough. Plain and simple. 28% is not going to be enough. We just spent $3 trillion earlier this year on the aid package where we paid out money. We're already running massive deficits, which, the fiscally conservative Republicans with the best economy ever still couldn't even get the deficit to go down because they were too busy slashing taxes for people.
Right.
Republicans know this. They do this on purpose. They take control of Bush took control of a roaring economy from Clinton, and then tanked it, trashed it with tax cuts and loose regulation. And Obama fixed it, and then turned around the single greatest economic recovery in American history, the longest sustained recovery in American history, followed immediately by Trump, who in 3 years blew up the deficit, blew up the debt, and cut taxes again, was completely irresponsible, knowing full well that when the Democrat comes into office, right, that they would just lambast him with problems and associated with austerity. We need to do this. We got to do sequestering. We got to do all kinds of bullshit. Republicans
Great
know that
obstruction
Democrats come
party.
into office. Yeah. Republicans know Democrats come into office and they fix problems. Republicans can just come in and cut taxes for themselves and their cronies, and then blame it on the Democrats again because they're idiotic, uneducated, fucking stupid followers are going to come in there and be like, yeah, the Democrats tax and spend. The same trope that they've been espousing for the last 40 years. It's not even close to reality.
All right.
So
you don't think that the corporate tax rate being set at 28% is enough? What would it be? Would it be pre-Trump 35%?
If I remember correctly, in the 1950s, immediately following World War II, when the United States had the single greatest infrastructure for manufacturing in the world, we had not just the best infrastructure, but most of Europe's manufacturing infrastructure was destroyed. China was destroyed and not yet fully industrialized. Japan was destroyed and not yet fully industrialized. From the 50s to the early 1980s, the 3-decade post-war era, the United States led the world in exports, manufacturing, global financial policy. Like we instituted things like the GATT, the Global Agreement for Trade and Tariffs, which eventually became the World Trade Organization. We instituted the World Health Organization. These are all derivatives of what is known as the Bretton Woods system. During that time, federal expenditure on its own citizens for things like social programs, for the single greatest public policy ever implemented, which is the Montgomery, not the Montgomery, but the GI Bill, the original GI Bill. These were all funded by government expenditure, which was all paid for under a balanced budget, where taxes on corporations and highest earners was approaching 70%. So following a global pandemic, following the 2 longest wars in American history, following the 4 rounds of the most irresponsible tax cuts in American history, I think it's not beyond the scope of reason to implement a 50 or 55% tax on corporations and the highest earners.
So this is a little side thing.
If you look at
real quick,
yeah.
What do you think about and Democrats and Republicans both, it was a bipartisan agreement, and that was to increase the military budget by some $60-something billion. That 60 stuff, and that's year to year, they added that to the budget. That alone, going towards defense spending or military defense, could pay for college tuition for all. Universal college tuition. Do you believe that was money, that money should have gone to the military for defense, or to the defense budget? Or do you think that we already spent enough on that? Because it's my understanding that the military wasn't even asking for an increase, yet the military got an increase. So, and
I'll tell you what, you in my wheelhouse now.
Exactly, but our budget is already that of the next 10 nations, at least, combined. So,
yeah, I'm ready for this one. Let me go refill my drink. Let's take a 120-second break, and I got all the answers for you on this one.
Okay.
All right, I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, he's gone.
What are you watching? Bud just asked me about the defense spending, so it's going to be a minute. Okay. All right, I'm back. Sorry, I had my earbud in the ear. I was talking to my wife. You know how that goes. So, a couple of things to understand when it comes to defense spending. All right. First, are we ready? We good?
Oh, we're good.
Okay. First thing to understand, all of government expenditure goes to four things. Okay. Four things: defense spending, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. That's it. That's it. Discretionary spending makes up less than 1% of the overall budget, right? And remember, we have to borrow money every year for our budget to make that 100%, right? So some portion of the big four, depending on how you want to partition it, whether it's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or defense, and all of discretionary budget is borrowed money. Or you could say all of that is our money, and then 10 or 15 or 20% or whatever of defense spending is borrowed money, or 10 or 15% of it all breaks down.
What do you mean by borrowed
how you
money?
Want to partition it. Money that is generated by issuing bonds, U.S. bonds, right? Which is the safest investment in the world, which is why other countries invest in them, because we pay our debt.
But who
we pay
are
our
we
debt more
borrowing
reliably
from?
than any country. We are borrowing from every country on earth. Every country on earth buys U.S. bonds. That's what money's generated.
Okay.
So the U.S. Treasury offers up bonds and says, buy these. Interest rates might be slashed to 0.9%, but it's effectively saving. So other countries and other private organizations will buy U.S. bonds because they know come the end of every fiscal year, we fucking pass legislation and we pay our fucking debts, right? So it's still the safest investment in the entire world. Although Trump desperately put that in jeopardy. But that's an economic discussion that really requires a lot more homework on my end and really some input from an expert to get into. But the bottom line is our slice of the pie, or our pie, is broken up into four slices. And the fifth slice is the tiniest thing in the world. Anytime you hear a fucking Republican talk about we need to, curb our WIC spending, which is for, poor single mothers to buy food for their kids, and we need to curb our welfare spending, or we need to cut, various social programs, and the National Institute of Health or the arts programs need to be slashed. Remember that they're talking about a piece of water vapor inside of a drop inside of a 5-gallon bucket. They are lying to you about how important that money is. Not even close. That money sees better return on investment than anything except for within the DoD. Right? The idea that cutting, welfare benefits is going to help us balance the budget is fucking insane. It just looks good to middle class, upper middle class white Republicans who drive ridiculously ostentatiously oversized pickup trucks on their way to their fucking coal-fired power plant powered homes to,
picking up on a hint of hyperbole here, but yeah.
Do what?
So I'm picking up on a hint of hyperbole here, but
Yeah, effectively what it does is it placates people who see the problem of government expenditure as someone other than themselves.
Right.
Right. Bottom line is our pie is cut up into four big slices. Biggest slice of which is the DoD, right? Ranging somewhere between $650 and $760 billion per year. I believe that money can be more efficient. Now, I also believe, as a member of the DoD who sees how that money is implemented, that there is a necessity for us as the United States and the global military and economic hegemon to spend that money. We'll go off on a little tangent here, but I'll give you an example. The economic security of America depends on a lot of things. One of those things, a big factor, is, say, freedom of the seas, right? For global merchant trade to take place, via shipping lanes and these large, container ships that deliver goods to the United States and to other countries around the world, for them to be able to do so without risk of, being overtaken, robbed, pirated by various countries or organizations, somebody has to provide security on the high seas. Well, guess who does that? We do. And we do that because it is a small, easily maintained fraction of what the Navy does. And we spend a large portion of that $700 billion a year in the DoD on maintaining, training, and deploying carrier battle groups around the world. Those carrier battle groups and their support ships are necessary for us to project power for our geopolitical means, but they also have the intended but tertiary benefit of providing security in shipping lanes, right? It's like putting state police on interstate roads. Make sure people are following the speed limit and there aren't massive shootings or robbery along the interstates. And then truckers can drive their goods all around the country, which opens up commerce, right? The same principle applies on the high seas around the world. So we are effectively the guarantor of security for shipping lanes around the world. That's something that we derive a massive economic benefit from. So there's a reason, that's just one example. There's a good reason for us to spend that much money on the DoD. That being said, could we reduce by 10%, 20% our spending in the DoD, if we weren't fighting the two longest wars in American history and having to pay the outlying unfunded liabilities of, disabled service members as a result of those
that's
two
a
wars?
point that I hear a lot of people talk about is they say, get out of these wars and cut the defense spending and then just freaking pay for college tuition.
So like I said, yes, if we hadn't been fighting the two longest wars in American history and destabilizing the entire CENTCOM AOR, we could have reduced our defense spending by a lot. The biggest component of defense spending that nobody talks about is the unfunded liabilities. And that is addressed by, first of all, the biggest cause is if you send 500,000 or 1 million people to war over the span of 2 decades, you have to pay them for the time that they're there. You have to pay them for their combat and hazardous duty pay. You have to pay them for their disability when they get a leg blown off and come home and are never the same. You have to pay them for their retirement if they stay in long enough to earn it, all of which constitutes a number. That number, the DoD can't effectively project. So a huge portion of that DoD budget every year goes to paying for those things that they couldn't project 10 years ago. So that's why the defense budget keeps growing, at least right now. One of the big reasons. The other big reason is, and the DoD has tried to address this with what's known as the blended retirement system, of which I am a member, where we all take less guaranteed money in retirement for more money up front. It increases the amount that the DoD has to spend on the front end, but decreases the amount the DoD has to spend 20 or 30 years from now. So if I live to be 70 or 80 with a military retirement, I will cost the government less money in the long run because it's effectively partially privatized. That's a good thing. That's a good thing for me. It's a good thing for the government. It's a good thing all around. I believe in the blended retirement system.
Okay.
But because of these unfunded liabilities, the defense budget keeps growing. Now, let's switch gears and let's talk about how that money could be better spent. Again, I'm a huge proponent of student loan or student debt forgiveness. Yes, I think it's the number one fastest way to provide stimulus to the economy, to the people most likely to spend it, and the people best suited to do that spending. People with some education, some life experience. There's nobody I'd rather give money to than people who at least attempted to go to college for a little while, right? And then, or to people who graduated from college. Give them the money, they're more likely to use it. You want to talk about freeing up trillions of dollars in the economy? That's $1.2 trillion that you'd immediately free up if you were able to forgive all student debt. And then in the future, from student debt forgiveness on, giving people who qualify the opportunity to go to college for free gives you a vastly wider pool of talent from which to drive new economic benefit, whether that's new businesses or more qualified people to choose from to join the military if that's what you were going to do. Right? All kinds of benefits can be derived from an educated population. Right? The more educated you make people, the better we are.
Yeah.
I think one of the most, from a national security perspective, the numbers say that less than, 70%, I think it's 70% of Americans are effectively unqualified for military service. Like that is shameful and terrifying. Fortunately, we have a large enough population where 30% of the population that can qualify is sufficient to recruit from. But imagine if we could increase the healthcare benefits to people and education benefits to people to move that pool to 50 or 70% that are qualified. Now
Right.
we're talking, it's just like in high school football. If you're a 5A school with 2,000 students to choose from, you're going to do a lot better in high school football on Friday nights than if you only have 200 students to choose from, right?
Right.
So widening the talent pool from which to draw for military service increases our ability to perform our national security duties. So I see it from a national security perspective. Yes, decrease the defense budget, increase social program spending for education and healthcare, and therefore increase the quality and quantity of people capable of service to this country.
All right. So that's a little roundabout way of saying what?
So it's a roundabout way of saying, yes, I support decrease. You asked about defense spending,
Right.
right? That's yes, I support decreasing the defense budget by a substantial margin in order to increase social benefits for the entire population, because it eventually will benefit us. There's, I didn't get into the other three massive expenditures for our budget, but I wanted to talk specifically about the DoD, which you asked about.
All right. How much longer you got?
12 to 15 minutes.
All right. So, environment. Now we're still on Joe's first 100 days, and we've barely scratched the surface. So, I already know off the top of my head that he plans on, through executive order, reinstating into the Paris Climate Accord. Is the Paris Climate Accord really anything special? How does it work?
So all the Paris Climate Accord is not vastly different than the Kyoto Accords from a couple decades ago. Was the Kyoto Protocol. All it is a series of promises that will institute legislation to incentivize participation in programs that will benefit, changes to our global greenhouse gas emissions and various other things. But what's important to understand is that no international agreement carries with it the force of law, right? We live in an anarchical system. There is no one world government that can say, America, you didn't do what you're supposed to, here's your punishment, right? They only go as far as we are willing to go. It is just a public commitment, not necessarily binding agreement. There are no binding agreements. right? Even if you
Right.
engage if you enter into a military treaty with another country and say, somebody attacks you, we will go to war to back you up, right? You could say that. You sign a treaty, you could have, 40 states ratify it and be like, we are unified in a military treaty with X country. And then when that country gets, detonated on by their nearest neighbor, we could be like, you know what? We don't really care. Whatever. Sorry, sucks to suck, but we're not going to come to your aid. And some countries have done that in the past. Yes, it hurts your credibility, but the worst thing that's going to happen is people are just not going to go into treaties with you anymore, and then you won't be obligated to do anything. So there's an argument for disregarding treaties that people some people would make. Hey, it doesn't really matter. So in an international system, you could say we're going to engage in all kinds of climate saving policies according to these Paris Accords, but it doesn't really matter unless you do it. If you don't do it, people will be like, well, you didn't hold up your word, so we just don't trust you anymore. Okay, fine. Nobody fucking trusts us right now anyway. I mean, Donald Trump just completely and wholeheartedly, publicly sought to undermine NATO, the single most effective alliance in American history.
So, I'm sorry to go back to the last topic, but because I wanted to bring this up, and I don't know what you can talk about, but I read a little something the other day through a place called The Intercept. You may have heard it. Says something about some secret wars in Africa, some shadow wars, because the Chinese moving into Africa and trying to set up some infrastructure and trying to get some deals done. So it's like China's way of imperialization.
So a couple of things. First and foremost, if you go back and you watch the Top Gear BBC or the BBC Top Gear with Jeremy Clarkson, James May, and Richard Hammond, there is an episode where they try to drive through portions of Africa and discover the original source of the Nile. While they're doing so, they discover I forget, I don't know, it's Kenya or whatever African nation it was that they were driving through at the time. They discovered, wow, the road infrastructure here is really spectacular. And one of the remarks they made was, it turns out that the Chinese have been building roads in this country for a couple of years. And they wondered why the Chinese would do that. And it's effectively a humanitarian effort that carries with it some promise of a return on investment.
Right.
What that is, can't really speak to. But I will tell you that the Chinese have followed a model that they saw work for decades for another massively, some would call, imperialist country who saw worldwide global economic benefit from helping others. And I would tell you, I don't see anything wrong with humanitarian efforts that help others, that carry with it economic benefit for this country. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, we will help vaccinate your children and build you schools if you'll give us mining rights, right? Like, America's done that for decades. And there's nothing wrong with that because it's mutually beneficial relationship. The Chinese have recognized the benefit of such relationships. It's imperative that we as a country recognize our ability to return to that sort of model as opposed to, I don't know, invading everyone.
Right.
And as it relates to shadow wars in Africa, I have no idea what you're talking about and can't speak to it at all.
Okay. I'll move on from that. Let's see. Racial equity. Extend the Voting Rights Act. Biden has pushed for the passage of laws to strengthen the Voting Rights Act. legislation to do so passed the U.S. House last year, but not the Senate. Surprise, surprise. Biden
Surprise,
advocated for extending the original 1965 legislation following the death of civil rights icon Representative John Lewis of Georgia, who Trump had no idea who he was in that Axios interview.
John Lewis might be the person most singularly responsible for defeating Trump.
Well, the in that interview, I don't know. Did you watch that Axios interview?
He and Stacey Abrams. No, I didn't.
Stacey Abrams is huge. She got.
Yeah, but John Lewis was the first one to endorse Joe Biden in South Carolina, which is the wall that prevented anybody from beating him in the primary.
Was it John? I thought that was
You talking about James Clyburn?
Clyburn, yeah.
Clyburn endorsed him too, but John Lewis was the one, the South Carolina representative, said, "Yep, it's Joe Biden."
Right.
If I remember correctly. Boy, if I got my black people confused, I'd be a real asshole.
But yeah, in the Axios interview, the interviewer, I can't remember his name, asked President Trump, what do you think of John Lewis's legacy or whatever? And he's like, I don't know anything about John Lewis. I just know that he didn't show up to my inauguration, so, basically it is what it is. It's all about me. He didn't show up at my inauguration. I'm not going to acknowledge his efforts in this civil rights movement, but, Did you get it?
No, what was the last part of what you said?
No, I was just talking about how in the interview, the Axios interview with Trump, and how he was asked about John Lewis and like his legacy and whatever, and Trump was basically just like, I don't know much about him. What I do know is that he didn't show up to my inauguration, so,
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, first of all, Donald Trump is the most self-centered fucking piece of shit politician, in modern American history.
True.
Second, it offered a pretty stark contrast with the fact that John Lewis had endorsed Joe Biden, and John Lewis having been somebody who walked across the bridge in Selma, Alabama, with both Dr. King and Obama, decades apart.
That's crazy.
John Lewis was the bridge from the struggle of the original civil rights era to the realization of a modern American dream of a black president, and not recognizing that, not immediately recognizing that, as president of the United States is shameful and unforgivable, and helped secure every single vote against him that he eventually got. I think that's it's pretty illustrative of what kind of person Donald Trump is, that he didn't immediately recognize that. Honestly, there's no two ways about it. That comment says nothing but, I'm a total piece of shit, and I don't recognize others' contribution to this country. John Lewis' entire life is characterized by service to the country. Beaten and bloodied in Alabama as a young man while marching with Dr. King, only to stand alongside and endorse the first black president in American history, who was one of the best presidents in modern American history. And to not, even as a Republican, like if you had asked George Bush or Ronald Reagan or any of those people, if they had been alive today, obviously George Bush, Jr. was alive, but if you'd asked any other Republican president, before Donald Trump about John Lewis, they'd have been able to tell you that. And to me, that illustrates how far how wildly radical the party's become. That like they see it as a badge of honor to denigrate somebody who's promulgated civil rights for more than 5 decades.
Goes against that cult is just that they're not worth it. They're not worthy. They're communists and terrorists and everything else that fascists say. But I digress from that point.
Yeah, the cults are going strong on social media right now, man.
The what?
The cult.
Oh God, yeah. Mask. Are you for them?
Masks?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wear a mask indoors where I work every day, all day.
It is a national
as a commander,
mask
I get the opportunity
to. Constitutional.
A national mask mandate?
Yes.
So, not a legal scholar or an attorney. I don't know if it's constitutional or not. I won't speak to that. Is it the right thing to do? Yes.
Yeah.
I'll give you a couple of examples where I think that there's probably a legal precedent for mandating certain things for the benefit of the greater good. First, what I see is there's been 3 major government expenditures by the federal government that have benefited society as a whole.
Can I guess?
One, not really relevant
one?
here. Yeah. Oh, go for it.
Seatbelts.
Nope.
Okay.
I'll give you 3 yeses. You can see if you can get one of them.
Okay, hold on. What was the question?
What are the 3 best federal government investments that have benefited society, American society as a whole?
Oh, Social Security?
I wouldn't say that. Next.
Really?
Really?
Are we
But
talking about
let's
like
have a
big
conversation.
programs? Or are we talking about like entitlements?
Big program.
Or
we're not talking entitlements. Entitlements don't work the same way as big programs.
the USPS.
You know what? I'll take that one as one. That's actually one I didn't think of. So I'll take that as a positive answer. Yes, because commerce has depended largely before the advent of Amazon and USPS or UPS and DHL. Commerce did depend largely on the U.S. Postal Service. So I'll take that one. Yeah.
The construction of the interstate.
Interstate highway system. Hell yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yep, that's one. That is definitely one I was thinking of.
I guess.
And one I mentioned
maybe
already.
Railway. The railroads. No.
Yeah, railroads probably you can make that argument. But the other one I was going to say is the GI Bill, the original GI Bill.
Oh, you said GI Bill, yeah. Why that one?
So, well, the GI Bill it was a perfect confluence of events, right? You've heard me say, right, just in our personal conversations, you heard me say that when I went to college.
For those that don't know, what is the GI Bill? Just real quick.
The GI Bill, the original GI Bill, was a series of guarantees that the federal government gave service members following World War II. That is, the VA-backed, VA-insured home loans, so federally insured home loans that required 0 money down, and a number of other benefits. But the other big one was money for a college education.
Ooh, right? I think I got the third one, but go ahead.
No, that was the third one. So it guaranteed a 0 money down home loan, federally insured home loan, and it guaranteed money for college, right? So if you're a World War II veteran who joined or was drafted at 18 years old in 1942, and you left the Army, the Marine Corps, or the Navy, or the Army Air Corps in 1945 at 21 years old. You could go back home, go to college, earn a degree for free, and then get a guaranteed home loan on your first house. After you get a job, you get a home loan, and you start your career, right? 22 years old. Back when college tuition was only a fraction of what it is today. And it's my favorite topic.
Like, I lost you like almost a minute ago.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what the heck just happened.
You still got sound.
I don't know what's going on here. Okay, whatever.
Did you hit a cable?
All
right, so
I don't know what happened, but anyway, go ahead.
So if you were that guy, came back 1949, go to college, graduated college after 49, and bought a house with a federally insured loan. Over the next 20 years, you were able to generate enough wealth to send up to on average, send 5 kids to college, pay off that home, and purchase 2 cars. The purchasing power and individual familial wealth that could be generated during that era was greater than at any point in American history. Your ability to pay for things was greater in the early 1950s as a result of the GI Bill than at any time in American history. And you got to think, over 1 million people returned home at the end of the war and qualified for GI Bill benefits. Yeah. That's 1 million of the most motivated, most capable people in history, given the ability by the government to overcome and surpass whatever economic status they came from. And those people generated so much wealth that they sent up to 5 of their kids to college out of pocket, and thus created the boomers. The boomers were given everything. They had generational wealth. They had the means to secure anything that they needed or wanted for an entire generation. They went to college without any debt. They did all kinds of things. Not all of them.
Which explains their unnecessary, it explains their entitlement,
It explains a lot, right? They're the most benefited generation in world history. Mm-hmm. American boomers had more handed to them than any other generation in any other country in world history.
Yeah, like my generation or Generation Z, I think it was my generation, is going to be the first generation that didn't progress better than the previous generation, like as far as wages and career and
yeah. Think about it. We're millennials. As millennials, we saw the collapse of Reagan's 1980s economy, the resurrection of the economy in the dot-com era under Clinton, the collapse of that economy with the dot-com bubble,
which is when I was coming out of high school.
Was when we were both coming out of high school, just before we both graduated, right? And then we saw the beginning of the two longest. We saw 9/11, the beginning of the two longest.
And then the crash.
Two longest wars in American history.
Yep.
During that time, we had the global recession, and then a global pandemic. So in our generation, we've seen 5 once-in-a-lifetime economic events that have disrupted our ability to generate generational wealth.
It's insane.
Which is insane. Which is why there needs to be more government
especially
involvement.
Considering that we are literally the wealthiest nation on the planet.
Yeah, but it's also why these are contributing factors to why our generation has incurred more debt, right? Why our student debt is outrageous compared to every other generation
Right.
because we never had, first of all, our parents were disadvantaged, right? Because they grew up following the Reagan economy, which benefited the wealthy, but what exploited the poor and the middle class and shrunk the middle class. The Clinton economy was booming, but guess what? That was still an exploitative, economy. It still pulled wealth from the middle class and the poor towards the top.
It didn't help that he lifted Glass-Steagall too. So.
Right. Well, that was largely a Bush administration. So Glass-Steagall, it was what was his name? Senator, not Lindsey Graham, but there's another Graham. It was a Graham. Okay, I'll come back to that. But anyway, how did we get on that topic? We were talking about, the GI Bill. So the GI Bill, the original GI Bill, was one of the major.
So you said infrastructure and GI Bill. What was the third one?
Like I said, you said the USPS, which is a perfectly good one.
Yeah.
We'll go with that, right? But it's once in a while the government. Well, the other one is the internet, right?
Well, I was thinking the internet also. Like, the internet and just like telecommunications
infrastructure, but largely that was done by private corporations subsidized by the federal government.
True.
But,
still subsidized.
If you remember, 15 years ago when we used to have political arguments at home.
But that's another thing though. Like the government funded for these transformations in our infrastructure, but now it's like this radical idea to like do the Green New Deal or something, or
right, and that's
fix our infrastructure that gets a grade of D+. Like it's just like, what are we doing? What are we doing?
Talk about, we've heard our own family members argue that, hey, government doesn't create jobs, and we just illustrated 3 examples of where government created massive amounts of wealth, right, through good decision making. And a Green New Deal is the next one. I 100% wholeheartedly, without a doubt, beyond the shadow of a doubt, believe that government choosing to transform and reorganize our economy towards an energy efficient, sustainable, green energy model is how we get the next major revolution in generational wealth, period. Because I think it'll transform our economy in ways that we can't foresee, just like the interstate system did. The interstate system was built so we could move nukes across the country rapidly to defend against the Soviets. Nobody at the time knew that we'd use it for massive amounts of distribution, trucking, commerce, and
hey, that's
one
that's one of the arguments for military expenditures. Is that a lot the internet came from military from
Well, so the idea for the military actually came from like a French. It was a French computer scientist at the time who proposed it. Yeah, he proposed like this interconnected, series of computers as a network. But it wasn't until DARPA got involved, the defense, research. Well, DARPA is a military DoD organization for research and development. But DARPA was like, yo, we can facilitate something like this for all of our DoD networks if we just build some massive servers and do all this shit.
Right.
And then
but
DARPA did that.
Neil deGrasse Tyson has like a whole book on this about the relationship, the connection between, NASA and space exploration and astrophysics and the military, and how there's like a connection there where we've gone after these things for military means, but it's helped us find or discover all these other things scientifically.
Whole lot of examples like that.
Technology,
GPS, for example. GPS was developed by the military solely
by a
so that we
woman.
could navigate. Yeah, and once it was turned over, accessibility was turned over to civilian organizations. What they do? They said, "Oh, what can we use this for? Like, we can use it for all kinds of things, like TomToms." And you remember TomToms when they first came out, and then GPS chips were put in every cell phone, and then they were put into watches, and now we use GPS literally 17 times a day. Every individual is connected to a GPS, 20 times a day, and it spurs economic growth. So there are definite benefits to government expenditure, but some of them can be more efficiently planned, right? I'll tell you what, when the Army was using GPS to navigate across the desert to fight the Iraqis before the Battle of 73 Easting, they weren't thinking one day somebody's going to be measuring their runtime on a Fitbit using this technology. Nobody had any fucking clue that's how it would eventually be used.
Yeah.
We just got lucky.
Yeah.
There are ways that government expenditure can be intelligently applied, and a Green New Deal is one of those ways. Just the ways we can predict make it worthwhile, right?
Yeah.
Massive expenditure for transforming most of our vehicles into EVs. One of the conversations Candy and I have had is I'm waiting daily. I Google to find out when the new Nissan Frontier is going to be available. I want nothing more than a new pickup truck.
Yeah.
But there's also the Rivian available in June of next year, right? It costs a lot of money, but it's a 100% electrical vehicle that meets all of my personal off-roading and overlanding pickup truck needs, right? Costs a lot more money, but boy, it would cost if the government would just give me the extra little few $1,000 push to purchase that one. It would make it really compelling
Incentivized.
as a purchase for me.
Incentivism.
Yep. And then if, let's say, they offered tax credits to new businesses that wanted to put up, 30-minute EV charging stations all around my state, that would make it really compelling also. And let's say they were to reduce my property or income tax because I drive an electric vehicle or because I wanted to put solar panels on my house. That would make it really compelling. And then all of a sudden, they may have saved me $15,000 or $20,000 over the course of 5 years, but during that time, I generated $50,000 or $100,000 worth of savings because I'm driving an electric vehicle and powering my home with solar panels. Now I've got massively more purchasing power.
Golly, what is that like?
Multiplied that by.
Are you thinking like 6 steps ahead? I can't comprehend. Just
imagine if you had that times 10 million households across the country.
What is this,
right?
macroeconomics?
Imagine how much more resilient our economy would be if the government gave us an incentive to make ourselves more resilient against economic impacts. If I drove a car that I could charge from my house and I powered that house independently from a centralized power plant grid, just imagine how much more independent I would be from the government. You'd think that these small government conservatives that hate government so much would just love this idea I don't need the government. I can drive my car. I can power it from my house. I can power my house with the sun. I don't need no fucking government. Why don't they buy into things like this?
Because it's not sold like that.
They don't really believe it.
Do you think
it's because they don't really believe it.
Yeah. Well,
I've said before, energy independence on an individual level is perfect for everyone, liberals and Democrats and Republicans and conservatives alike.
Yeah.
Republicans and conservatives don't buy into it because there's no way to oppress black people by doing it.
Right.
No, 100% is true. 100% is true. You mean other people could do this too and have more purchasing power and be able to go to college and get jobs that I currently have? Yes. Okay, well, I don't like it.
It could just be a class thing, but
Well, class is just a veneer for racism in America.
I know. Race is a social construct. But anyway,
Race is not a social construct. It's
it's kind of a social construct.
The idea that people are different because of what color they are is a social construct, but the fact that people are different colors because of where they come from and have different cultures because they are part of an indigenous, sort of, geographic area is not a social construct.
Race is a class concept.
No, races are different, right? Africans, North Europeans and Asians and South Americans are different. They're genetically different because of the geographic area from which their individual tribes evolved.
I'm talking about socioeconomically, bro.
Oh, they are socioeconomically striated based on policy. They could all be equal were it not for policy. Yes.
So let me ask. Let me just go ahead, and this will be the final question of the stream, because it's getting late.
Yeah.
Do you
Sorry
think?
if I'm rambling a little bit.
No, you're fine. This has been. I think this is a little more. This will be a little more enjoyable for any viewers than the last one. But the last one was great. But I think this one will be better. I turned you up a little bit because I noticed that you were kind of quiet in the other one. But I'm gonna see how that panned out once we're done here. But yeah. The last question is: do you believe that Joe Biden thinks that progressive means being progressive, or picking progressive people just means not picking white dudes?
No, I think Joe Biden's smart enough to recognize what progressivism means, right?
The reason I asked because of some of his picks that he's had so far, and it's like, okay, this person came from a Bush administration, or this person is kind of Republican, but they're women, so maybe that's what he thinks progressive means. It's because it's not a white man, they're a woman or a black woman. Because he has this what was it? It's an all black or all female. What was it? It was some
communications team.
Communications, yeah. Communications, yeah.
And then Kayleigh McEnany tweeted out, Donald Trump already has all women on his communications team, and then literally 300 tweets illustrating that is in fact 100% a lie.
Of course it is.
Anyway,
he's such a goon.
I think Joe Biden is smart enough to recognize what constitutes actual progressivism. I think that you'll find, and this is one of those things where I'm going to defer and trust the process, that he is selecting people likely to get nominated, but who will tilt left as soon as they get in. They're going to support policies that are incrementally progressive, that we will find ourselves looking back 4 years from now going, we're glad we had that. Because if you remember, the last time a Democrat was elected, the first thing the Republican majority leader said was, let's make this a one-term president. And obstruction. I think Joe Biden is positioning himself and his administration.
That's what makes these runoffs. That's what makes these runoffs in Georgia so incredibly important.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because you'll be able to, for 2 years, you'll be able to push through anything you want.
Yep.
But I think Joe Biden recognizes it's easier, not easier, but whether you get it or you don't, it is easier to position yourself as, hey, look, we're all a whole bunch of centrists. We all have worked for people you know and recognize. This new policy might seem a little radical to you, but, it's beneficial for everyone. And if you're able to straddle the ideological spectrum at the widest point, then it makes people who stand outside that straddle look a little bit more insane by comparison.
Well, he's like one of those 1990s. What do they call them? The New Democrats or the Blue Dog Democrat? What were they called?
Yeah, well, they've been called both, but yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of going back to those days.
Well, but he's not though. That's the thing.
But
Right?
in today, in the modern era,
Sure, but if he's able to move all of America and the general population
dude, 74 million
slightly,
people voted for Trump.
he's able to move the 80 million people where we need him to, slightly to the left. This is what Republicans have done. It's taken them 2 decades, but this is what Republicans did. Incrementally, they pushed us right and right and right and right.
Yeah, the Overton window keeps going right and right and right and right.
And if you can slowly but surely, incrementally but inexorably move the population left and make them realize every policy, hey, this seems radical, but we got it passed. This is good. Just like Obamacare, right? The majority of the population supports Obamacare. Any polling will tell you they support Obamacare, even the individual mandate. And people thought in 2010 it was the craziest fucking thing we ever had. We can't do this. Now, 10 years later, if you attack Obamacare, you lose polling numbers. You just lose the polling numbers.
Well, especially if you call it the Affordable Care Act. But yeah.
Obama and Biden understood that then, and I think Biden and his team understand that now. And now it's time to secure that health care, reinstitute the most important facets of it, to add on to additional things that will prove to be insanely popular, like student debt forgiveness and tax increases on the rich, like actual tax increases on the rich, balanced budgets, stronger economy, and better social programs. I think Joe Biden understands that it won't seem radical enough to those of us who want to see radical change. But it's going to seem reasonable by comparison when AOC, who I love, and other, and Ilhan Omar, when they throw up the death rattle and are screaming, this isn't leftist enough. For most Americans, that looks good for Joe Biden. It makes him seem moderate. Even though he's moved us left, people don't realize that he's moved us left.
Well, no, people don't.
Not
people
uncomfortably
don't.
So.
Right, but people also don't realize that it is that pressure from the squad, whatever you want to call them, to shift things to the left that has forced Biden a little more to the left, and just shifted the conversation within the Democratic Party to the left.
Yeah, I don't think Joe Biden sees that
6 years ago, you said Medicare for all. Even Democrats were like, no, like that's not happening.
Right.
Now it's 80%.
Of the Democratic Party?
Democrats, yes.
I think if you combine a public option, yeah.
Right. But some type of single payer healthcare system, like literally every single state in the primaries, what do they call them? Not the exit polls. In the exit polls, Medicare for all had a majority, favorability rating in every single state. Every single one for the Democratic Party.
Sure.
So, but that's just how much the conversation has shifted in just the past 6 years.
And I think Joe Biden and his team understand the concept, and moving us incrementally to the left and seeing positive results with small changes.
Okay. I understand. Okay. I understand the healthcare argument on incremental change, and that's good and all. But when it comes to something like global warming, and when it comes to climate change, is that something we can really do incremental change on?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it'd be enough.
And what do we have to do to get other countries to step up? Because we have smaller countries, third world countries, that are just starting to go through their industrial revolution. So what happens with them?
Yep.
Do we have to pay them off, or?
So
looking something
we
up?
need to convince. No, I was taking a picture. I just noticed that. I'll send you this picture, but I just noticed my American flag reflects in the image from my guidon from my last company. I'm sending it to you now. You'll see what I was taking a picture of.
Well, I can't
No,
see it
so
immediately.
if you're
So.
trying to address climate change, no, incremental change is not going to be enough. Not at this point. Would have been 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
The idea that we do need massive structural change to address climate change. We 100% do. But the only way to do that is massive federal programs on the scale of what we saw with the coronavirus relief package in the trillions of dollars. You
Or the
need to
New
make
Deal,
it worthwhile. Yeah. Right. You need to make it worthwhile for people who are otherwise fucking Republican redneck idiots to drive an electronic vehicle or have solar panels on their homes. But the thing is, that's not beyond the realm of possibility. It's just not. It's something we could achieve right now.
Yeah.
The Germans did it 13 years ago.
But that wasn't my question.
Right?
My question was,
right now.
I understand we could do it, but what do we do about India? What do we do about China?
We need, good question. Diplomatic approaches without understanding. So first thing you have to do is understand the internal problems that India and China have. And that takes experts in that field, right?
Correct.
And I have a lot of experience with China, but I am by no means an expert. You have to be able to address their own internal problems and then frame those internal problems in the scope of solutions that are congruent with long-term global climate change, congruent solutions.
Right.
That's tough to do.
Yeah.
And that takes a revamped State Department with experts who are well steeped in their individual specialty based on whatever country it is that they're working in. That's a totally different conversation.
Yep.
But it is a good justification for the expansion of a lot of our
military? No.
military programs. It is. I mean, a lot of our State Department employees come out of programs from the military.
Right.
They get their language training, their country, specifications, things like that.
Right. Mm-hmm. Simping for the good old military-industrial complex.
Listen, man, it wasn't like 48 minutes ago you were talking about the benefit of NASA and the military.
Yeah,
it's just another benefit.
I know.
Look, you want to solve DoD spending? Embrace the blended retirement system, which is the law now, and really embrace the idea that that our procurement system and our reliance on private corporations for military procurement and equipment needs massive amounts of reform.
Yep. All right, man. I think that's going to do it for this episode. I enjoyed it again. Hopefully, maybe we can make this a weekly thing, maybe?
Yeah, Mondays probably aren't best, but we can definitely make it a weekly thing.
Yeah, Tuesdays are probably better, but I have something going on tomorrow. So
you act like you got the most important, events in life ever. Like, we should make it a Friday early evening thing. It'd be a lot easier.
Well, it's Friday though.
Yeah, Friday. Yo, I'm 36. I ain't got fuck else to do except for wait for one of my soldiers to get in trouble and get a call from the MPs. So maybe we could do Fridays.
Yeah, we'll see. But we'll coordinate. But hey, man, like I said, love doing it. I can't wait for the next one. And thanks for coming on again.
I hope this shows up in the recording, because there was a long delay where you were frozen and then your voice is sped up really fast. I hope that shows up.
It'll show
up. But yeah,
up.
this is a lot of fun. I enjoy it. It's the only opportunity I get to talk about a lot of this stuff. So I look forward to doing it again next week. Thanks.
Cool. All right, bro. Love you.
Love you too. Have a good night.
All right, you too. Later. All right, guys. Whoa. That'd be me. Well, that was fun. I don't know what's going on here. I'm just going to have to say, oh, no. Oh, well. I guess I'm just going to go ahead and end this stream since this thing is really weird. Like, hey, America. All right. Anyway. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please click like and subscribe and hit that notification bell if you liked what you saw. If you didn't, then go away.